Hi, welcome to week 6. This week we're going to talk about Twitch skills and digital games. I might call them video games, but I want to just kind of stick with the general idea of digital games because I think it encompasses a lot of games that aren't your traditional video game, but you might still refer to it as video games. Anyway, hope you enjoy this week. This week, the agenda is to first go over Twitch games, and then we'll look at digital games, and then we're going to look at a little bit about game feel, which kind of continues on the video game conversation, and then we'll do our references in closing like we always do. Just to kind of start out, Brathwaite and Schreiber argue that, at the heart of all games, they're dominated by either chance, Twitch, skill, or strategic skills, or maybe a combination of the few. Games may have more elements or even 2 or 3 of all of these, but one always has to kind of have the strongest influence on the game's outcome. So we've already talked about chance and strategy, and so this week we'll talk about Twitch. The elements of the video games or digital games aren't going to be comprehensive, but they do provide a starting point for future research, maybe as you carry on your game design careers or you look more about game programming or game development. So we'll start out today looking at a survey of some these general concepts. So we're going to start out with Twitch games. I'm going to call it movement and speed because it has a lot to do with the movement of bodies and the speed and the rate of things that can be completed. Strategy skills aid in kind of finding patterns and making strategic decisions. But yeah, Twitch is movement and speed. Brathwaite and Schreiber argue that Twitch games are fun due to kind of the mastery of the difficult of the dexterity challenge. So you're trying to get better at responding to a certain element or a certain directive in a maybe more quick or more accurate matter. We'll look at everything. Like strategy skills, players get Twitch skills by responding to a task over and over again and kind of becoming a master. So it takes a continuous exposure and practice to kind of get better at elements of Twitch. Some people might be inherently better or have different abilities, but so a lot of times this practice is what kind of makes you better at some of the Twitch challenges. So I'm going to kind of go over what happens for Twitch decisions, Twitch balance, and Twitch tuning. So as far as decisions, if you're thinking about how to design a game using Twitch skills, decision making in Twitch games is usually rapid, often even as many times per second, as opposed to maybe one decision every few seconds or a few minutes in like a pure strategy game. The one thing that's interesting is most Twitch games have an obvious correct answer that a player should take, and the challenge doesn't come from maybe like, if you're a strategy, you're thinking, what option should I take? But Twitch challenges come from if you can do something quickly and accurately. This illustrates a contrast. While obvious decisions aren't as useful in strategic games, they are more useful for Twitch games that rely on speed when the game can begin to kind of outpace the brain. So where we talked about maybe obvious decisions weren't as fun, if just for the in a regular game or a strategy game, like we talked about last week. In Twitch games, they're often obvious choices. You just have to do them in the right time. And as a designer, it's your job to figure out what pace someone's brain is and their abilities to be able to execute the tasks that you're requesting. Often the information is on the screen and players can see enough to have a decision, but they just have to quickly make a choice and maybe do it faster than the enemy. Even games, I always think like Guitar Hero or something like that, where you have to learn the song and do it quickly, or Dance Dance Revolution. But then also like any kind of, I think of Mario, you just have to quickly beat the boss, or you have to, lots of bosses that you come across. You have to figure out what decisions you have to do and do them quickly. So they kind of have these Twitch skills kind of built in. And also like, sports games. We'll kind of talk more about just different types of games, but you also do have to balance the challenge. Like strategy games can be hard for children. Many feel they might feel Twitch games might feel too difficult for some, and create uneven playing scenarios. It also can disadvantage those with diverse abilities. So also you have to think about the audience and kind of design for everyone in mind. So if you do too many challenges too quickly, it might also cause players to be overwhelmed and frustrated. And the general idea is that don't make a physical challenge harder than the target audience can handle. So then again, you also have to know your target audience. But also, if you skim down the amount of challenges, that if you don't have enough challenge, that can bore players. So there's a balance. Again, you have to make it can involve players being progressively more difficult, can also, or the play being progressively more difficult. You might start out easier and you have to get, sometimes things will get faster. It can also involve a number of decisions made and the time allowed for those decisions, which is fast decision making in general. But they also argue that you don't want to slow down Twitch games too much unless your target audience needs or wants it, because Twitch games are an adrenaline rush, and stopping the action of a player to strategize or to think about what they might do is, Brathwaite and Schreiber say, it's like going on a 5-mile run and stopping every few minutes to do a crossword puzzle. So know that the idea of Twitch games often is that fast-paced adrenaline rush, and so you want them manageable for your audience, but not too slow where they don't feel challenged or they disconnect from the game. So tuning the challenge, or making it balanced, involves adjusting the challenge for every player's ability. Brathwaite and Schreiber note 4 different ways to contour this. You have to first think of difficulty levels. Controlling how fast a player reacts or how accurate a player is key to tailoring individual abilities. A longer reaction time or more forgiving aim, or maybe using some automated recommendations, can allow for more kind of universal playing opportunities. And you can also think about universal design rather than saying some people are not as good. Just stop thinking like, oh, some people are really bad at this. Just think of universal design, and that's just you have to design for everyone in mind. Also, you can have this dynamic difficulty adjustment. Some often digital games might only have different levels for players, but the game can also adjust as it recognizes a player is struggling or also frequently losing. You can have difficulty curves. Again, games can start off easy and get progressively harder, like Tetris. It starts out kind of slow and easy, and then if you do well enough, by the end it's a block finding frenzy where you have to figure out how to get the rows deleted before it's too late. And also play testing. We talked about play testing. Repetitively having someone's groups or players test over and over can help you figure out where issues are. You have to switch these players, because once players play the game, they can start learning it and start learning the patterns and figure out what to do. So you always need to switch it up to see how new players are interacting and reacting to the game. Just kind of going to explain a few Twitch mechanics. First, we have pure speed. Speed mechanics asks a player to do something, do a task in a minimum amount of time, or do a repeated task in as many times as possible for the set tasks, which often results in button mashing. Jeopardy rewards a player with the first one with the right answer. So sometimes speed, or just doing things the fastest in a minimum amount of time, can be one element. Timing elements also ask a player to push a button or complete a task at just the right time. For instance, Dance Dance Revolution asks a player to not only speed through the task, but do it at the specific time. And also, like Jeopardy also requires you not just to do it fastest, but do it at the right time, because if you buzz in too early, your buzzer doesn't register. Another mechanic is precision. Precision mechanics involve doing something not just fast or at a particular time, but also accurately. You can think about shooting games or Jenga where you have to remove a block carefully, or even sports games where you have to kind of put a ball through a specific goal at a certain time. You know, you have to be kind of accurate with your or precise with whatever element that you're trying to use. There's also avoidance mechanics where this asks players to often quickly avoid a particular element, like any type of boss scenario where a boss speedily tries to attach a player or attack a player, and the player must quickly avoid hazards. Or I think it's the game Subway Surfers where you're running and you have to kind of dodge a policeman or an oncoming train or whatever. You know, you kind of have to avoid different obstacles in a quick, fast-paced manner. Then you also have time pressure, where completing any task in a particular time adds pressure and can change the overall play system of a game. So, you know, if a football game went on endlessly, I'm assuming that, or maybe say it lasts 6 hours, the gameplay might be different than it does if it only lasts, you know, I don't know how long they normally last, you know, but because there's commercials and whatnot, but you know, there's only a certain number of minutes in a quarter. And anyway, I'm just saying, if we change the amount of time a game has, if there's like a limited amount of time, then the play style will change. So finally, just some quick examples. You know, you have like an athletic game like tennis or a first-person shooter where you have to be kind of the accurate and maybe quick. Somebody's quickly jumping out and getting you, or you need to quickly jump out and get somebody. Guitar Hero. You have the avoidance there. Someone's trying to avoid the giant blue flame or whatever that is coming at the other player. You know, you have the speed in a racing game, or again the precision from Jenga we talked about. Pinball, you know, you have to quickly respond to the ball and maneuver it around. Or Pong, you had to kind of, the little disc things went like paddles or whatever they are in Pong. Had slowly went up and down until it got faster and the ball would go back and forth. So anyway, so you can just see kind of different examples of games that use movement. That leads me to my first quick polling question. Which type of Twitch mechanics do you find the most difficult? Speed, timing, precision, avoidance, and time pressure. And if you need a little review, go back and look over the slides and think about which one you either you think is most difficult, maybe the one you dislike the most, because I think that the one I dislike the most is the difficult one. I think I don't like precision. I'm not very precise. I'm quite sloppy when it comes to video games, or any games. So now we're moving on to kind of digital games or video games. I'm going to say designing digital, or maybe I'll just say video games. Video games is kind of a whole different beast than what we've already talked about. You know, all games have like mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics, goals, themes, that kind of thing. Sometimes even digital games or even board games, but like on a digital platform. So there are particular elements that only occur more commonly in digital games. So I kind of wanted to look at those, and I'm going to do it around the 3 C's of kind of video game design. And that's what most of this kind of lesson, the gaming is about. So without further ado, let's delve into the 3 C's of game design: character, camera, and controls. However, I will say we're going to skip character because we talked extensively kind of about character and earlier on in the weeks of our course. So if you want to review character, you can go back and do that. But for now, we're going to, I wanted to reiterate those 3 C's involves character, but we're going to stick to mostly camera and control for this lesson. So camera. Camera provides the player the view to the world. And so we have to think about what view are we going to give our character or player when they're immersed in our video games. So a couple things to think about are camera styles. The camera angle impacts how your game is designed and how your controls are mapped and kind of how your artwork is designed. And there's, you can have more than one camera style, but kind of stick to a main camera type. Here are 4 styles that kind of can illustrate possible differences. The first style is a static camera. Static cameras don't change position or distance or field of view and stay on kind of a single screen location and image. I think Candy Crush, Plants vs. Zombies, I think it's Tetris. You don't really do anything except stay on one screen in these games. You also have the scrolling camera, or kind of side scrolling. These scrolling cameras are partly static cameras in that they focus on minimal elements, but they do scroll other places in a view. It's important to kind of tune the hydraulics of a camera or the speed at which it moves, because if you go too fast, people can be sick or annoyed that they can't come to the right place. And too slow, the game might move on without you. So it's all a matter of tuning when you have scrolling cameras. There's also the parallax scrolling camera. It's a technique in computer graphics where background images move past the camera more slowly than the foreground images, which create the illusion of a depth of a 2D scene in the distance. So kind of a more technical definition. And if you one that, I don't have 40 years to to sit here. I mean, maybe I do, but you don't want to sit here forever for me to go on and on about parallax scrolling unless it's just a class about parallax scrolling. Anyway, so just know that that's a type of camera, and if you want to look up more on this camera or lots of others, this is more of a survey to get you familiar with the terms rather than to take deep dives into the different types of camera styles. Just want to mention that, yeah, sometimes in these, like the scrolling cameras, sometimes their player's movement controls the camera, where the player always kind of stays in the middle, and other times, the camera itself forces the player to keep up with the screen's movement. I guess I'm just a fan of Mario games, and like the early Mario games that I started out playing games on. And there was always those levels that you had a lot of like jumping over mushroom caps or something where you had to the screen would move on whether you wanted to or not. So it kind of added that extra challenge to the movement. Then we have multi-pane cameras. This is moves a number of pieces of artwork past the camera at various speeds and depths from one to another. It creates a sense of parallax or depth. A multi-pane camera gives the illusion of depth by zooming the camera towards and away from the screen. There's some older examples like Hercules action game from 1997, which used the multi-pane camera to create a bidimensional gameplay, the forerunner to 2.5D. So I think of old-timey animation, because if you've actually seen an animation pane, you kind of see like the different layers that they put on to kind of make the character look like they're kind of more immersed in the world. So I guess I think if I'm thinking multi-paned, really emphasize that paned, not like pain, like, ow, my arms hurt, but like, paned, like window paned camera. So, all right. Now we're going to look at different kind of camera styles in the way that you are able to see the game in the world, so to speak. You can see, first of all, that you have some pros and cons to the camera style. The pros and cons, some advantages of a first-person style are that, aiming weapons is easier. Players kind of view the character as their self. You're kind of looking through your character's eyes, which kind of makes creating kind of atmospheres a little bit easier, I guess, because it's kind of you in the game. And also players get a chance to look at weapons in the world kind of more close up, or kind of more intimately, I guess. The disadvantages can be that gauging movements is a little bit harder. Players can't necessarily see their character, which kind of distances the person and the character from themselves. Then the players do not always look where the designer wants them to look. You know, if you're looking through your character's eyes, maybe you don't, the designer loses maybe some type of control of where the camera looks. Um, and then finally, maybe game objects have to be exaggerated to kind of for the distance to kind of make up for the view that the first person view. Um, Other kind of pros and cons is the doom-induced motion sickness, or DIMS, or simulation sickness, or kinetosis. This is players can get motion sickness due to the field of view in the game's camera. It happens kind of when your eyes register movement, and your inner ear responsible for balance doesn't. Um, some argue that the reason for this is like a camera that goes up and down and rotates, is particularly the problematic view that causes the sickness. But know that, you know, yeah, so there are advantages where you kind of like get this, maybe like you're the character in the game, but then also you don't necessarily see your character as much, and you can get kind of motion sickness. Other advantages that you can do are like other kind of sample effects, like, you know, can take blood spatter or damage kind of on the screen or field of vision, or you can kind of have this like raindrops or mist if it's raining, or have predator vision. You can kind of see like a night vision or heat sensing alien, or, you know, blurry or drunk cam when you could. I don't know how many games simulate someone going to a bar and drinking too much, but, you know, if you get hit in the head, or your character's and been damaged or in pain or been shot or something like that, you might have this blurry camera to indicate that something has happened to your character. And then second person view occurs when the camera is seemingly given to another player in the game, and that allows the other player to see themselves and kind of other elements, like maybe around a corner or a bird's eye view, or maybe something that the character themselves isn't experiencing. I'm back to that the Mario example, where we can see that the little guy was, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, he was following Mario around like it too, I don't know, and kind of being like the camera for Mario. Um, uh, Another example I've tried to find on the internet, because the second person isn't quite as popular as others, is the second person can be found in Battletoads from 1991, where you can see your opponent in a fight, and then the view changes to second point view, because where you can see the fight from the opponent's point of view, but you still control the main character, so the player has to aim the attacks the screen you're looking at yourself. So it's kind of an interesting spin on, I guess, the battle scene. Maybe you all can think of other second person games, but that's not my forte. Whereas, you know, first person views kind of looking through, you're kind of the character and looking through their eyes. Third person kind of sees the character kind of from a distance. It's the third person view can also be called a follow cam, and can typically looks at kind of a character's back, and may rarely, but not necessarily, see the face. Um, uh, as Rogers notes, though, that the limitations are not negative, and it lets players get kind of a better view of the world, the action, and what's coming up behind them. So it's not. I don't know if I guess I think kind of almost like third person better, because I do get the motion sickness from first person view a lot. But I don't know if that's because I like usually only play first person games at night when I'm done with everything else and I'm already tired. But anyway, so yeah, so third person, you kind of see the character as they're going, even though it might often be the back of them. Um, to effectively design for third person, Rogers from 2014 recommends paying attention to several different things. And the first one is camera movement, and he argues that you should treat your camera as kind of a separate person, and make sure to give camera space around your character. And I will return to this image from the camera movement one in another slide, but I use it here to kind of show you to think about your camera as a second person that's following around your other camera. If it often kind of has some problematic things when you're seeing your character, or like from a design or development kind of point of view. Sorting occurs when a camera goes through a person and kind of breaks the illusion that the game functions well. It also can kind of technically expose flat color background layers. You can avoid, or Rogers says you can avoid this by thinking about geometry and giving the camera a detection radius where the character or the objects of the world kind of translucent, even though that can kind of disorient the players as well. But anyway, just know that there could be some sorting issues as far as like the colors and the makeup of a game if your camera is going through people and just from a development point of view. Also, Rogers encourages us to think about controls of the camera. If the player controls the camera view, often the game won't work if the player points up or the points the camera straight down. And we're going to talk about player control later of cameras, but especially in third person, like it's important to think about how the game works and when it doesn't work, especially if you're allowing someone to look up and down, if they can actually move forward if they're looking up or down. Anyway, there's also kind of an issue of camera flipping. This is also called ping-ponging or bouncing, and occurs when a camera can't find a good place to rest and instead kind of flips between objects. It's a programming or mathematical problem that needs to be addressed with your programmer. So it's something technical to keep in mind. A lot of these are more technical considerations. This Roblox, when I'm thinking about problems, I automatically think of Roblox because I've seen the games. Yeah, sometimes they're really bad and have a lot of issues, such as that. I don't this one. I don't know necessarily it's the best example of camera flipping, but the person got stuck in the wall. Okay, obstruction. Obstruction occurs when something gets between the character and the player. In this case, that this makes the camera its own character that has okay. If your camera is being obstructed, kind of think again about the character or the camera being a person and move it to scoot around the character rather than kind of standing far and not being able to see them. And then you also think about position. There's a disagreement whether the camera needs to strictly follow a character or if it can kind of more freely move around. When you have a freer follow, you might have less obstructions, and you can do more chasing if the game has that element. It ultimately comes down to how much control the view you as designer want to give up and to give to other people. And then a note about tunnel vision is another camera problem that can occur when the player is moving through tight environments like caves or sewers or dungeons or tunnels. Like low ceilings, narrow passages, and doorways can cause all sorts of trouble to the camera. There you can avoid low angles, instead keeping camera at the shoulder height or above the player, but you can watch out for low hanging things that might cause camera to have sorting issues or whatnot. So just thinking about tight spaces might be especially hard for tunnels. But anyway, yeah. So third person is kind of this idea. Yeah, you're following around your character, but also know that it can cause some issues as far as maybe the more technical issues of game development. It's also worth mentioning that there's some multiple player cameras that do exist. You can have a split screen that allows for 2 or more cameras at the same time. It works better with larger monitors, so you have enough room to kind of see what's going on. You have a zooming screen that zooms in if one or more characters on the screen at the same time. And if, like in Little Big Planet, if one of the characters gets left behind, there's like an arrow that you can have to kind of figure out where he or she character is at. And then there's also the camera in picture style, which allows like one view of a camera of the game and the smaller view of other screens. It can be in sports games where you kind of see one player was like a receiver in a smaller frame or something like that. Or also this one example kind of has like where you look at the screen, but then there's a little camera view where you can also see how much bloody damage you are inflicting upon your foe. So interesting to think about. Then we'll do our second quick polling question. Select a camera style and then name a game that kind of represents this style. Another element to think about is the player camera control that we previously mentioned briefly. Rogers notes that giving a player control of the camera is something important to consider. And bad things happen though when you give players control of the game. They start sticking the camera in places and spaces they shouldn't, and find ways to get cameras stuck and generally screw things up. But so overall, be cautious when you're giving control of to the player, but also think that players do like to be able to kind of have this freedom of movement and a lot of simulation of what you're seeing in the world. But there are various styles you could use for that: complete control, no control, or partial control, and we're going to kind of go over each one. So you've decided to give your player control. Yes, I want my player to have control. There's several different options you can have. The first one is complete control, which allows a character or the player to kind of use the camera to look around maybe 360 degrees at any time, whether they're running, standing, fighting. It says, Rogers mentions that the disadvantage of this is that players can get quickly disoriented, miss something interesting, or miss the important level events, clues, suffer from dims or the motion sickness problems. You also have a free look camera where it allows players kind of option to choose when to look around. If you press a button, you can kind of simulate the movement of a character's head during this look. This option kind of give a third-person camera view to to change to a first-person kind of point of view, and would go back to maybe the natural position of like maybe the third person look, and reorients the way that the character was facing at the end. So it's just kind of maybe a more temporary way that you can kind of change the camera view. Players typically do again like the reorientation, and it should be done kind of with a quick single press of a button where you can get back to where you were and how your game is normally controlled. The selective control camera is kind of like the free look camera, and it's activated by a press of a button, and it lets people look around, but it offers a more specific view, like a close-up of a sniper scope or something like that. And then again, kind of back to the second person view, it occurs when a camera is seemingly given to kind of another player in the game and allows the other player to kind of both see themselves in the possibility of elements, like around a corner or bird's eye view. So the player has control, but again, it's not necessarily their own player that has the control. It's the second person character in the game that's being able to kind of have this look and control. For instance, this game Skate, the point of view is meant to be seen as someone following behind you on a skateboard with a camera. So it's kind of an example of this kind of view. But maybe you've decided you don't want any player control. No way. Why no player control? If players only worry about playing the game and not have to worry about the camera view, you get to determine what the player is looking at. There's a lot more control for you as a designer. Your shots can look better because you can spend the time designing like the perfect world, so to speak. There's always limited amounts of time, but you're able to kind of spend the time, and what the player is going to be looking at for the most part. Your game becomes a ride like Disneyland that players get to watch and play, and it helps people focus and not miss anything. Your moves can be more complex if you don't have to think about which view that a player is using. So anyway, I think that the idea here is that without player control, you as a designer have more control. If you're wanting to create some artistic experience, you don't necessarily want the player themselves to be navigating the world. You want to show them certain things at certain times, and that might be a reason to kind of give up this character control or camera control. A third option can be, maybe player control. You can give a character partial control. And there's different types of views that are useful for this type of like partial control. You can kind of have the character viewed in I guess a different way. Like the 2.5D uses kind of three-dimensional characters and world models, but limits the camera movement in the same manner as kind of a biodimensional game. These are more technical descriptions, so I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it. Isometric camera is not quite a side view and not quite top down, but you kind of create it's like a toy view of the world. In isometric view, players get kind of a quick snapshot of an environment's layout and the relationship of items, which makes it good for environmental puzzle solving, or you can see hordes of enemies, on a map or something like that. It's related to kind of the idea of God view, where you kind of, this is maybe farther out, where you can kind of see at a glance what the area looks like. And players can kind of control where they look, but maybe not necessarily all the control. Also, top-down models kind of give you a window into the world. Although it's considered to kind of be an old-fashioned camera view, you can still find it in arcade games and classic games like the one Smash TV. I don't know how classic it is. I've never heard of it, but maybe you have. But anyway, you can kind of see a top-down view. And then also, AR cameras have grown in popularity with like mobile games, and you can use Pokemon Go. In augmented reality, you kind of virtual characters kind of appear in the world, but it's and scaled to make it look kind of real. But so players get some control, but not necessarily they're not controlling the worlds necessarily. Anyway, I'll kind of skim through this quickly. Just a little more about camera basics. I think this is just interesting because, if you're thinking about designing a game, so much of a game is a visual experience, like a digital game. You're trying to recreate this world that you can make decisions on. So it's so key to engaging people is the world that you see. And so we're going to spend a little more time with camera basics, and you might be familiar with this from photography if you have a background in that, and just thinking about the types of shots that are available and what you want to be depicted in a particular screen. I'm using Kerbal here as a reference, our favorite green astronaut. I think he's green. We have the extreme wide shot, which is a shot of the character or location from kind of a very far distance. It's kind of perfect for showing castles in the distance, or a planet-killing space station in orbit, or a little astronaut man in space. Then you can get the or there's obviously a couple different kind of shots. There's the extreme wide shot, the very wide shot, which is closer than the extreme wide shot, so you can see the details, but it's usually kind of establishing a place or space at the beginning of a story. Then you kind of have a wide shot too, where the person can be seen in a frame, but also kind of see like the conditions that they're in or they exist in. Medium shots, whether it be medium or medium close-up, kind of feature character from the waist up. Your character may or may not be wearing pants that day, that the book says, but it could also be kind of a head and shoulder shot, most commonly used when a person is talking. It's not this extreme close-up that you see of just their heads, but you do get to see kind of their heads and additional body parts, but not their whole body. The close-up is also called kind of a headshot. It's tight into a character's face and it shows expression. Extreme close-ups are really close-up. Cuts and cutaway, cutaways used to be like to see a character's reaction, or to kind of cut in and say, I need to examine a clue, and then you show kind of a detailed description of a cue. It's kind of a cut between two different ideas, I guess, or two different things you're trying to depict. You also have these older over-the-shoulder shots taken from the shoulder of a character. You kind of see maybe the character reacting to something, or seeing something at a distance in their view, or kind of what they're looking at. And then a point of view shot is taken from the perspective of someone or something, maybe the eyes of the player. And this particular point, I thought it's not the eyes of the player, but it's the eyes of Kerbal as he's going through this rocket ship that you've built for him. So just kind of interesting to think of all the camera shot opportunities that you might have to use or utilize when you're designing visuals. Similarly, you can think of kind of how the angle of the camera is positioned. It might be more useful to look at this on your own rather than me trying to describe the angles to you. But you can kind of have eye level where the camera is looking at your subject. The high angle, from above, makes things look less impressive. If you're showing, minimizing someone's size by showing them from far at a distance. A low angle makes things look more menacing or impressive. If you're having a boss fight, you can see them towering over you. A worm's eye view, the camera is literally on the floor, or is as like a worm was looking at you, or from the worm's point of view. Bird's eye view is taken high in the sky, and then we have like a Dutch tilt where you kind of have a tilted screen, kind of might be used in horror games. Those camera angles kind of also pair with camera movements. You kind of see the Rogers book examples here I thought were the most useful. You can see kind of arcs, or you following, the dolly move, the zoom, the dolly zoom, the pedestal, the pan, the tilt. Kind of some of them are more self-explanatory than others. For the dolly zoom, the camera is moved slowly towards and away from the subject. It can also be called a tracking or crab shot. Speed can make the dollies more interesting. It says if you have a slow crawl or something suspenseful, kind of moving in. And a zoom, the focal length of the lens changes, giving the illusion that the camera is moving. You don't want to start zoom in through items and create that sort kind of issue that we talked about. But you can, maybe see textures more richly, or go from kind of seeing different perspectives of something. A dolly zoom, the camera adjusts the focal length, but it's moved back and forth. And you're following somebody. The camera moves with the subject. A pedestal, the camera moves up and down. Panning, you go, left to right. Tilt, you kind of tilting, moved up and down, but the position stays the same with the camera. So yeah, just kind of camera basics if you're familiar with them, or if you're not. It's kind of interesting. I'll let you all pause this and look at it more closely if you'd like, kind of a visual guide to camera angles. Some we've talked about. It adds a few more. Pause if you'd like. It's also worth mentioning some camera best practices. The rule of thirds is that you want to put the item of focus either a third of the way up or a third of the way on one side or another. You kind of want to, give your subject some space, but you always know that you can break the rules that you make. Crossing the line, just like the rule of thirds, you can kind of imagine this imaginary line cuts through the middle of your scene. You want your hero to kind of have continuity, so you want them to be running the right way, like the same way. If they've crossed an imaginary line and you maybe change the camera angle, or if you have two people, you want to make sure that talking, that there's not a third person that would somehow be in the middle. You want, I guess, the camera angles to make sense within the context of what you're trying to portray. Other best practices, kind of point the objective of the camera at the objective. You can see this chair example. It's not necessarily the camera, but you realize the red chair is something that we're looking at because of the attention that's given to that space. So you want to make sure that your camera is pointing at the most important thing, or if that's what you're going for. There might be other techniques where you don't want it to, but at the same time, for the most part, you want the importance to be explained through the focus of the camera. And then also don't let characters get out of sight. If you've got a fast Sonic that's speeding through things, you always have to make sure that they are within the range of the player that's trying to play them. You might have to make something transparent to show the character behind the wall, or if your character goes off screen, you have an arrow to point where it is. But make sure that keeping your character in the camera view makes sense, and it isn't kind of cheapening or making players frustrated about their gameplay. So just a quick question for everyone. Does everyone kind of have a basic background in photography, or know about different cuts or scenes or shots that people have? Just curious to know what everyone's background is. And then some final words about cameras from Roger. Choose the right camera for your game to prevent or minimize the motion sickness, minding your frame rate, speed of camera, the level of topography, or just how you design your game. First person camera allows for kind of greater immersion. Third person camera allows you to get a better view of your character and your world. Treat your camera like it's a spotter or kind of a different, its own character. Make sure when removing camera control, make sure your players know it. Try to think about using Hollywood style angles and photographic principles when you're thinking about showing your characters. Don't let your characters out of sight, and accommodate multiple players using kind of the same, using the players using game camera. So you can kind of, those are kind of best practices, clever ideas, and final words about cameras. All right, so now we're moving on to the third C. We had camera, or character, camera, and controls. So of the three C's, while some games might not have characters and some games might have anything beyond like a fixed screen, controls apply to kind of every type of game. And you always have to remember that humans are playing a game, not like some superhuman or computer itself. People have human hands and human muscles and need to be the center of experience. So these considerations kind of call for us to think about the people that are actually playing, and the abilities and needs of the players that are playing the games that you design. One thing we can do to start out is kind of think about ergonomics, and we can think about how people actually interact, or the abilities that people have to use their hands, and what we've conditioned to be accustomed to as far as controls, and also the limitations of human hands. And we not only have like a controller for a console game, but we also have keyboards, the laptop built-in keyboard, separate keyboards, mice. I drawn a blank, the guns or something that you might use to shoot in a shooting game, or any types of different attachments. There's lots of different things you can use to interact with the game. First-person shooters seem to have similar controls, placements, joysticks assigned or joysticks are assigned in certain ways. I guess I'm trying to say there's a lot of things that we've become accustomed to, and whether or not you think you can do a better job, maybe your idea for control might be better, but people might reject it just because they're so used to other things. So just kind of think about what's come before you and what is humanly possible, and also think about what will make people most comfortable when they're playing a game. Tips for controls: if you're designing for the really young, keep button pressing simple. Don't create combinations because younger fingers can't make them, can't reach them. If you're designing a kids game on the keyboard, try not to spread out key commands because kids try to hunt and peck anyway. It's going to slow kids down, especially if you want them to make quick twitch reactions. First-person shooters can use hotkeys for chaining attacks or special spell effects. You can give people options to customize their control. So just different expectations. I have a kind of a list I was going to talk about, but it just seems long and laborious. But just know, yeah, like the type of game comes with different expectations. So what you don't want to do is do something weird or reverse the controls or make everything go the opposite way than people are used to, just because maybe you want to be quirky. People don't like that, so they would just try to change everything back to maybe how they're used to. So there are several different, actions or reactions that you can get from the controls that you use. You can do the tap. It's a quick press to make a selection. A double tap can be maybe used to verify a selection or open and close a window or indicate a direction where a character should move. A time tap requires a player to tap in time with the gameplay, like you'd find maybe a rhythm game. You might also have staccato pokes, where you can use them for kind of movements of intense action, like a finishing move or something. A lot of times, true, two-hand typing isn't possible on kind of small screens of mobile devices, so you might have to do some type of a hunt and peck kind of thing. You don't want to make that, don't irritate people and making that where they have to hunt and peck for things that need a lot of speed. Touch and hold works when you kind of maybe need to hold pick up and move an object in a certain place, or hold and drag, I guess, is more of the move and drag. But if you want to hold something, touch and hold. Hold and drag is when to drag something. Should have read my slideshow before I talked. A flick, kind of, tossing something, Pokemon Go, you just kind of flick a ball and it goes and catches your Pokemon. Page up or page down flick kind of works in multiple directions, and you can kind of scroll through pages of text or menu options. Pull and release can kind of be like a rubber band or a spring or a pinball kind of thing. Scrubbing is used to erase or cover something on a screen with rapid back and forth motions, little kids' games where they have to literally scrub a dog with their fingers. The swipe, you probably have all swiped before, and swinging a sword, drawing a line, moving past a potential date on a online website or a dating site. Shape drawing, you can draw using a finger or pencil. Maybe you're playing a game like I think I've mentioned I played Jackbox with some family, and you're drawing something and you draw shapes. Shape tracing, swirl, you can draw circles. Pokemon Go, again, you kind of swirl to do a curveball. So anyway, there's lots of different finger tricks that you can use to kind of help a player engage and carry out some of the game mechanics in a game. A quick polling question for everybody, kind of what's your favorite go-to, I say equipment on which to play a game, but kind of like how do you play a game? Do you play it on a computer, a console, mobile device, some type of other device? What's your pick? So if we want to think about best practices, don't confuse or tire your audience. Try not or you should try to use as few buttons as possible to minimize confusion. Players will just button mash if the abilities to play are too hard, and then they might get gamer's thumb or like literally feel pain if you force them to do too many movements far apart or do too many rapid movements in time. Also, yeah, consider that taps and holds have different movements, and think about what you want character relative controls or camera relative controls, especially for first person. Are your controls going to be based off the way your character is facing or the way the camera is facing? Think about, like who's controlling or what is the controlling? If you have a virtual controller where the buttons have been digitized, make sure to make it clear and clearly show people how to move. And maybe if you have a joystick, it snaps back to the center. So make the control visible, keep it away from the sides so the people don't have to go off the screen. So that was point 2. Never have a button do nothing if pushed. You could, this is point 3, you could have a negative response, a sound effect, make it clear in training that the button doesn't have a function, indicate a skill assigned to the button hasn't been learned yet, but action should happen if a button is pressed. So people expect a button to do something. So if you make it do nothing, it's going to be confusing. And also you can consider motion like an actuator, gyroscope, camera-based motion controller. You can help people, the camera can move when they're getting damage or getting a reward, or you can, the camera can shake when you're trying to roll dice or something like that, or you're actually, doing something, or the controller can also kind of use infrared sensors, like if you're playing Ring Fit or something like that, where you're running or the old Wii's, you can actually do movement and play sports games and things like that. So consider some extra elements with your controllers. And overall, final thoughts about controllers, let ergonomics, or think about the people using them and how comfortable people want. Maybe consider programming the controls that match the genre that you're using, so that people familiar with the type of game kind of understand how they're going to play it, rather than redesigning the controls. If you have a button press, make sure something happens, even if it's a negative response, to let you know that the button isn't working. Make sure to give, don't tax your players too hard where they get injured. Yeah, I guess, just think about the audiences that you're going to use, and also try to think of universal design and how some people, may not be able to play to the level that you're designing something at. And so always think about how you can make play good for everyone. So I kind of want to finish the discussion on games, about game feel, because the feelings that games evoke are very important to being in this zone, or feeling like you're in the flow of a game. You play as embodied, and so you when you feel like you're kind of become part of the game, you enjoy it more. So feeling is really important. And the idea of game feel is kind of, I guess I would say, yeah, the affect or the feeling that it gives you. Rogers also uses the word friction, and kind of describes how, the feeling of a game isn't, just some positive reaction, but it's also maybe a negative reaction as well. Like when you're playing a game, where do you not feel that the game is working right, or where's the friction coming from? So, or resistance. So thinking about game feel has to do with like how people, I would say, like enjoy a game more, or maybe or the reasons why they wouldn't enjoy it as much. There's a huge conversation about game feel, and I don't want to spend another 45 minutes talking about this. So I want to kind of run through it and get you familiar with the topics, and then let you explore this a little bit further on your own. But when you're thinking of a game feel, good games do provide certain feelings. You can have Pitchlamar and Johansson, probably saying those wrong, and also Swink, say that the great feel has 5 experiences. First, you get these aesthetics of control, where you get you feel like you're controlling the character, or are you feeling like you have it important, what you're doing kind of influences the outcome. Also a sense of mastery, like when you're doing something well and you know it and you're beating the game. A good game gives you this sense of like of accomplishment, I guess I would say. It also extends the senses, and you kind of feel like you maybe the seeing, touching, hearing, the different senses are kind of engaged when you're playing a game. Also gives you this extension of identity, where you kind of like where you're playing the game and you kind of feel like you're maybe immersed in the game, or just gives you, it changes your identity as a person itself. And also it gives you a good game, kind of gives you an interaction with unique physical reality within the game. You're experiencing this game that a designer or a developer has made, and you're kind of a new member into this world that's not doesn't look may or may not look exactly like your own. And then we kind of go back to this idea of game feel and flow. Get the feeling starts with the flow and how we feel connected or flowing with the game, this magic circle. Players feel like when they get lost or players have a heightened sense of feeling, I guess, when they get lost or have in this flow. And I guess I'm going to talk about 8 task measurements for positive potential engagement. So we can look at these at a game and see whether or not our game is actually accomplishing things. Are people getting a sense of completion? Are they able to concentrate on the task, or is it too hard or too easy, or they feel disengaged? Are they able to concentrate on it? Does the game give you clear goals and also immediate feedback where if you're doing something right or wrong? Do players get this sense of control that they're able to affect the outcome and also move their player? Are they do they have the sense of involvement that kind of removes the awareness of or frustrations of everyday life? Are you kind of in this different world? Does your sense of self disappear and then also maybe emerge stronger afterwards after you kind of get this sense of completion or mastery? And also, is the sense of duration of time altered? Do you feel like, and this is one for me, like I know I'm playing a good game when all of a sudden time has escaped from me. But games and their connections to flow are closely analyzed through kind of feedback, goals, engagement, but also kind of think about, are there is your game that you're playing able to provide these types of feelings when a player plays it? Sorry, I can get a little complicated there. Trying to think of my words. And just a quick polling question for everybody. What games do you feel the best when you're playing and why? Just, I guess I should say just game. Try to pick one. What gives you this feeling, or maybe what is the feeling and what game gives you that feeling? But now we're going to talk about flow and this idea of juice. Like juice is, I mean, other people might explain it a different way, but in my interpretation, juice is this idea of what you do to a game to make people more connected, to give you more of this close feeling with it, or kind of get you into a flow. So I'm going to talk about 4 ways that you can kind of juice a game to make it more effective, I guess I would say. You can first kind of turn up the juice with movement and actions. You can make the game more effective by kind of playing around with some of these movement and actions. 10 different important movements and actions are: 1, basic movements. These are the definition of parameters of a game, most often refer to characters that include their speed, acceleration, friction, and braking speed. And remember, these are things you can tweak in a game to make it seem more real, or to make it more fun, or to juice the game and be more connected. You can also kind of play around with gravity. Designers can pay attention to how much force pushes an object to the ground and how fast objects fall. Designers often opt for higher values than Earth gravity to make it feel like the player has more, that they have more control. The terminal velocity is that objects in most games don't start falling faster as they fall longer. They just fall at kind of remaining at constant speed. Jumping for characters like Mario can be more precise if characters know, or if players know, like their character has a consistent speed. This is one of my favorites, Coyote Time. This is kind of movement that allows the player kind of a short amount of time off a cliff where they can still jump, and it kind of comes from the idea of Wile E. Coyote's the cartoons, where he would kind of run past a cliff and still be there. Invincibility frames. These are frames that are considerations that give a player a time where they are invincible and support the player with more chances to do more things. So corner correction, this option helps adjust a player's path if they were to get to stick to a regular geometries of walking where they might otherwise get stuck. So I think, I guess you kind of get a little wiggle room when you're walking. Collision shapes. Collision detection is the problem of determining the intersection of hitboxes of arbitrary shapes and sometimes prevent the collision of certain objects in a game. It's more complex than I want to talk about right now. Button caching is where common player support function, where you jump buffering, where controller code kind of buffers the pressing of a jump button a few frames and execute the jump after kind of the player has landed. Spring locked loads. This design element allows for switching modes if a button is pushed and held and is used to kind of build interpretation. You can hold and aim or drag and drop of movement as an example of this. And then you also have assisted aiming. This helps player be more precise with aiming, especially for younger players. So this is just kind of a general list of things you could do to make a game more interesting, more challenging, more maybe more connected. Obviously, back to this idea of like juicing the game, making the game more appealing for your audience. The second kind of juicing is event signification. I cannot say this tonight. Giving games more juice with showing telling us when we've done a certain event. These are limited time signifiers that a relevant thing has occurred. Designers can exploit these to give kind of more feedback to the player. A screen shake kind of shakes the camera to indicate something significant has happened. A recoil simulates a pushback, like fire after you're firing a gun. Shot particles can kind of spread particles over the camera, or you can like, I think we were talking about blood spatter at a certain point, or you can see a character has burst of particles, that's kind of more realistic. A cooldown visualization, when you can when you're like showing a player on the screen when they can do an action again. It could be a cooldown bar or grayed out button that'll come back in. Ragdoll physics, this is one of my favorites. That's why I have this one illustrated. Ragdoll physics mean modeling a character using joints, forces, and rigid bodies instead of animations. I guess, when the character, that didn't really explain anything to me. I was trying to use a specific thing, but when the character has these physics that kind of defy actual human physics, and they kind of become a ragdoll, so to speak. Color flashing is a technique that communicates by flashing graphic colors to indicate a change in state or damage. You might get hit by something and then colors start flashing. Impact markers indicate significance. For instance, if you shoot a character in a first-person shooter that's partially hidden, the impact marker could indicate who was hit or how much damage they took. A hit shop is also called an impact freeze, and animations can pause for a moment on impact. It's a staple for fighting games to communicate the severity of a hit, but can be used for something like landing or falling on a platform as well. Audio feedback is a way to give feedback and signify an event has happened. Sound's a huge part of a game, so you can use sound or haptic feedback, with or touching, especially with kind of physical things. That's haptic feedback when your controller vibrates, or you kind of have some other kind of felt experience in the game. So anyway, yeah, these were ones that you can use to signify something important has happened. Another way to kind of juice your game is to and kind of make it more engaging or just impactful is kind of playing around with time as far as speed. You can time is almost always used to slow down a game rather than to speed it up, and it's often most used to amplify the experience or to clarify the intensity of an impact. there's 4 popular ways to manipulate time. You can have the freeze frame that's frozen for a set of time. It differs from hit stops in that the freeze frames don't just pause objects while the world keeps going. Freeze frames hurt the progression of time in the game. Then we have slow motion, where slow motion slows down the game for a period of time and helps the designer to emphasize and a player to focus on an event that could have been gone too quickly, like a final blow or of a difficult boss, like Super Mario. You know, Bowser kind of slowly, or at least slower, kind of spins around. Bullet time allows the player to slow down the clock to do actions they couldn't do without that control. And then you have the instant replay that takes a power from the player, but also kind of gives you clarity of what just happened and replays a pivotal moment of the game. And then finally, this one I thought was interesting because I'd never really thought about this before with video games until I've kind of studied it. The idea of like time manipulation, but is involving persistence. Persistence can be considered also temporal consistency, and it's a way to keep the player's past encoded in like persistent images. This often, like you can have trails, where trails are left behind a moving object that kind of provides players and spectators a recent history of your latest actions, you know, where these missiles are coming from, because they kind of have these trails. Decals can be used to note achievements of players. You can have a decal or a smear of blood, or you can kind of you kind of keep track of what you've done and kind of the badges of progression. Then you also have fluid interface, where the goal of, sorry, hold on. This kind of maintains fluid continuity when, you know, like you get something and it doesn't immediately disappear. Like it goes at a slower pace, where, like, you know, I keep using Pokemon Go because I play Pokemon Go, but you know, you walk a certain amount of time and you get all these prizes, and they don't immediately just pop away. They kind of slowly pop in the distance unless you actually do them, and then eventually they linger on the screen after being collected, I guess I should say. And then an idle automation or animation is when small loops of animation that play once a character stops interacting with their character. They're kind of superficial to the core mechanics, but can kind of contribute to the overall experience, kind of making the player laugh, or thinking like, oh, I should have been playing with my character. Look, he's slacking off, or something like that. So they are these little subtle things that do affect the game and the way people feel about a game. So which of the 4 ways to turn up the juice or to juice a game did you find the most interesting, and why? Of movement and actions, event signification, time and speed manipulation, or time manipulation as far as persistence? And now overall, a kind of a summary and regrouping of the different ideas of game feel. There's 3 different categories that, you know, juicing, or like the game being more or connected to the player kind of fits into. You can have physicality. This is the design domain describing the elements of game that are kind of physical simulation. Um, a game feel often rests on this pillar, where designers shape the feel of a game by turning up the parameters of physical simulation. So, you know, if you want the game to be more realistic, you provide things that kind of recreate maybe the physical world, or maybe don't recreate it, maybe let you experience the world in a different way. You know, you don't have regular physics, you have ragdoll physics, or, you know, but you also could have a very realistic world that you enter as well. It just depends on the game and the purpose and what you're doing, but there are these physical things that can alter the way people feel about the game. Another thing is amplification. It's concerned with amplifying or intensifying the player's experience. You know, it empowers the player and then communicates the importance of events. You're not just trying to recreate certain things, but you're also trying to emphasize them and make them bigger, or make them more meaningful to you. And juicing the amplification means providing adequate feedback for a player and their actions, and create coherence between different aspects of feedback. So you want them to the feedback in a way of like saying, okay, this is an important event, this is important, these are things you should keep track of. So we have physical worlds, amplification, then we also have support. These are the things that help the player execute a challenge or provide convenience. Um, Um, in general, support has to deal with, making the game experience nicer and better, I guess, for a player. And it could be, help with an aim, or it could be hints, or it's just, or creating controls that ergonomically are easy to use, or configuring the buttons in an easy to view way. So lots of different ways that support could be interpreted, and along with physicality, amplification, and support. But the overall idea of game feel and feeling more connected to a game and getting the state of flow is to look at the ways we can tweak a game to make it more realistic, to make it less realistic, just to make it more enjoyable for a player in general. And as we bring our lecture to a close, I just want to say, more things to consider as you move along your game design career that we just didn't get a chance to talk about, or, music, levels, cutscenes, game development and programming, which would probably be like a next step if you're interested in game design. We talk about, you know, YouTube video and very basics of kind of looking at how we do game development and design. But it's a huge area, and also very competitive. So it's useful to kind of know a lot about the industry, know a lot about programming and coding and and whatnot, and just kind of be an all-around person. But also, it's important to position yourself as an expert in something. You want to be able to go in and market yourself as not somebody that just likes video games. You want to say, you know what, I'm really good at music. I'm really good at tweaking the camera or like being camera. I'm really good at artwork. You have to be good at something that you can sell yourself on. So overall, I think learn about everything, but also be an expert in something. A summary in general, overall, this readings kind of deepen our discussion of games and kind of make us think about games as in ways I want to leave you in the future. Twitch games are kind of dexterity of the hands and the body and the mental reactions. Games not only cause physical and mental reactions, but kind of emotional or affective responses. We can look at games in many ways, but one lens you can use is this 3Cs: the characters, camera, and controls. Game feel kind of deals with these effective relationships to a games. You can streamline or tune or add juice to kind of create levels of feeling. And just know that there's so many different ways you can research game design and game development, but hopefully this gets you started on your path to being a more informed designer. Here are our references, which I'll let you look at on your own. And in closing, thank you for your time. This is our last lecture of the semester. Other weeks will not have these lectures, so thank you, and I enjoyed speaking with you after all this time. Have a good week.